So yeah, I'm doing a podcast. Thanks for helping me set this up, and thanks for coming on. One of the things that I've always loved to do is mentor entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs generally, because that's my background. Um, and so I kind of felt like now is finally the time to start talking about building technology and start bringing people on, and time like the present. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when we were talking about the idea of doing a podcast and you were really bringing it up and wanting to do it, I thought it was a great idea. The biggest thing that I think um, I like about how you want to do this is taking more of the perspective of showing people how to really run a business, right? We have so many conversations behind closed doors
Yeah.
that um, I think could be really beneficial for folks who are in similar situations to us trying to build a business from scratch. And at this point, we're 5.5 years into it. So, we've really figured out a form and a way to have our dialogue and be effective and make decisions together. And I think, especially for folks who are running a business with their best friend, that can sometimes be challenging. So, to me, um, being able to just give people raw, organic conversations that we're going to have
Yeah.
anyways in a format where they can view and listen to it was what really kind of attracted me to this idea.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think at the end of the day, one of the things that I've learned in business is that business is a lot about storytelling. And so relating to people, connecting with people, understanding past narratives or past things you've seen, and then applying it to a new context, a new frame. And like you said, you can go your entire life with building out your stories and connecting with people and talking, but it's hard to then translate that to others and help them out. So just by unscripted kind of conversations about how we already think about things, if we can help one person somewhere do better or get to a fundraised round faster or actually build a product that helps someone or figure out if you're doing the wrong thing faster, if we can do any of that, I mean that's a win for me. And it's just helpful to kind of think through these ideas.
Totally, man. I mean, I think, more and more recently we've been tapping into social media, right? And posting more things on LinkedIn, starting to share our experiences. And I know for me personally, um, it's been exciting. I mean, collecting and gathering all of the knowledge and the experience that we have gathered over all the various parts of
Yeah.
our career, being able to share that with people, like even if it only is one or two people that it ultimately helps or
Yeah.
impacts, you know, makes it all worthwhile for me. So trying to just be as authentic and organic as possible for people to really get true insight into like what are these discussions, how do you apply these principles for business, or how do you apply these lessons to business or whatever you're doing in life, not even just business. But I talk a lot about the perspective of how business aligns with sports, right? Like I'm a big sports guy, big team sports guy, and for me there's been so many parallels from my experience of sports and business and all these lessons that we learn from playing team sports and how they apply to running a company or being a part of a company, right? And trying to achieve goals, whether they're business oriented, life focused, whatever they may be.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's super interesting. Like you have that sports background. I do not. I was the person that was like selling Pokemon cards on eBay, right? So not
Yeah. The,
exactly.
the iPod,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, selling iPods. But we'll say that for another podcast. But like the concept that we've been really learning over the past 6 to 12 months, and you can learn something in a book. We were talking about it last night. You can learn something in a
Oh, yeah.
book. Someone can tell you it, and you're like, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That's totally makes sense. That's how you do business. And then you can go 6 years, fail a bunch, and then actually experience it firsthand, and be like, oh, fuck,
That
that's what
makes
they
what,
meant.
yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
And like one of the things that I think we've been bumping into recently is like having clarity of roles and people in the right role. And it might take you one, two, three, four, five, six different tries with getting a person in the right role. But when you do have that right role, they flourish, right? They do extremely well. And like, I think that's probably a very analogous thing for teams as well, right? Like there are different roles and positions. And I don't know how often it happens in football, but I've seen it in esports at least, right? League of Legends, where someone will play a specific role and then they end up flipping them to a different role and they just succeed a lot better. So like how has that been, like your leading matter, right? This is one of the things that is most critical in a leadership role when running a company is like getting great people in, yes, but then also making sure that person is in the right seat. So like how have you like evolved
Yeah.
in that ability over the past X years?
Oh man, I mean, when we first started Matter, and I first was trying to figure out this concept of putting people in the right seat and titles, I was a little bit jaded from titles from coming from Goldman, right? At Goldman,
All the title thing
yeah, I
and
mean, it's like,
status. Yeah.
status, like really like your title of analyst or FIP, financial investment professional, or vice president. Like, what the fuck does that really mean for what you're doing? And ultimately, it really doesn't mean much. So I was always a little bit jaded from that structure. But what I learned from the time at Matter is kind of to what you're talking about, just like with when you're building teams or sports teams, building a team, it is so critical to have clarity and understanding on who the people are on your team and more specifically what their strengths and their weaknesses are. And it's the same way with business.
Yeah.
Like the reality is when you're looking at a technical team, and this is where a lot of companies that we see or have worked with, where in my opinion I don't think they do very well, is really assessing beyond, okay, what is the skill set? What is the framework that I'm trying to find this engineer be able to do? Or what's this experience this product manager has from Google versus being like, okay, who do I have on my team? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? Being comfortable saying, like, these are your weaknesses, right? These are your strengths. I want to figure out a way to put you in a position to like excel by catering to your strengths. And then I want to find people to come in to help pick up on your
Yeah.
weaknesses.
Yeah.
That's a key part of building a team. And like any person who's ever played team sports or have built a team from a sports perspective or has been on one will be the first one to tell you that it's very raw. I played a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
football in my life. And one of the first things you have to do to really come together as a team is be willing to accept each other for who you are and understand where your flaws and your strengths are to come together and try to be as strong as you can be as one unit. It's the same thing in business, right? Utilizing titles comes very handy in bringing clarity and accountability for people's roles. Sometimes titles are more just for external purposes,
Yeah.
right? The way that we try to utilize them in Matter have been more as an indication of what is your responsibility and expectation for that job. And I think it's gone fairly well. But, even with Matter being such a small company,
We're
I
about like
think,
25 people or something.
yeah, we're 25 people now, due to everything happening in the economy, it's been a little bit rough from kind of where our peak size was. I think we were at like 42, so we've stepped back a significant amount. But even in a company of 50 people, titles still are a little in terms of how it
Yeah.
really puts people in a good direction because people are required to wear a lot more hats. You're touching a lot of different areas in a business when you're that small of a company versus if you're 1,000-person company, having that total alignment and clarity over your role and your title being an indicator of that brings a lot more stability and balance for scale, right? So it's it's been an interesting thing to figure out in my journey because I've kind of went from like in the early days of Matter
You're like
being,
fuck titles, right?
yeah,
You're
we were
like,
so flat,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
you
yeah,
you believed in that too.
yeah,
Like our whole
absolutely,
mentality was
absolutely.
like fuck titles, like it's not really adding any benefit. We're a very flat organization, and we're still very flat in the way that I think people are able to put in input and help make decisions and like from that perspective. But I do think that like bringing clarity, accountability, structure, clarity, and kind of the chain of command, things of that nature, titles become very important.
Yeah.
You know,
I
um,
I want to actually double like dive deeper into one of the things that you said there because obviously there's a lot to unpack. Titles are a tool, right? And if you're using them effectively, they're value additive. And if you're doing them for ego, it's can be toxic, right? And
yeah,
some
hundred
organizations have
percent.
that. The other thing though that I think is going back to like players, their strengths and their weaknesses, and kind of assessing on that part. I think at least for me, and this has been something that I've been working on and growing through and still struggling with, but I've never liked having weaknesses. I don't think anyone likes having
No,
weaknesses, right?
and nobody likes when somebody else tells you about your
Absolutely,
weaknesses.
absolutely, right. Especially if you're not like looking for that or
Or if
trying
you're in
to
the
find
right
it.
mindset,
Yeah,
or if you're in the right place for it, right? Because you have to create these safe spaces, these environments where you can come in and actually give constructive criticism. Us growing up, I know you know me. people who don't know us, like we come from backgrounds of constructive criticism.
Yeah.
That's what our dads or
Yeah.
our parents or our
It's chip on the
peers,
shoulder type
right?
type
That
entrepreneur.
was like how we grew up. Like for me, everything was focused about always thinking about like, how do I do better? What do I improve in? Right. And not a lot of like positive feedback or reinforcement for that. But anyways, I know you're,
No, no, no. I mean, it's good to kind of have that context of like it can be hard to receive feedback. Period.
yeah,
Right.
totally.
Period. That being said,
It can be hard to deliver it too.
yeah, and finding the right words, the space, all that. That being said, though, I think an area for me that I've started to really tap into and accept is when you do finally accept or at least are open to bluntly looking at your flaws and being like, I suck at this. I'm just bad at this. Maybe I've tried to work at it for 3 years and I'm still not great at it. When you're able to actually accept that and then say, but I have a team. Who can I tap? How can I ask for help to shore up those weaknesses? And it's not like you have to remove ego. Like I think
100%.
success in
And that's
life is like perpetually shedding your ego and it's
hard.
always there and you're always trying to like truly let it go. But when you're able to, and this is kind of what I've seen over the past 6 months that I've been doing this a bit more, is like I can do so much more and it's actually more enjoyable. Me suffering through shit that I'm not good at and trying to get better at something that I don't like doing, I suck at, I've never been good at, I've been trying to get better at it, but like fuck that. Like just bring someone else in to help with that and then do what you're really good at and you'll also enjoy it, which is why you do it in the first place. And like I think people, we always talk about like shoring up your weaknesses and I think, there is certain times when it makes sense to get better at a certain area. Like if you're a really bad communicator, probably useful to work on that and be a little bit better at communication. But it's also okay to accept that like maybe I'm never going to be great at that,
Yeah.
but I'll surround myself with people who are, and I can ask for help with them. So it's been cool to kind of grow in that area as well.
100%, man. I mean, I think that's where you also get this concept of being humble. So many people think, I'm humble in this way or that way. But when you truly can let down your ego and your guard and be accepting of, you know, where your flaws are and your weaknesses are, I think that's when people then flourish, when
Yeah,
they figure out how to surround themselves and make people better. I mean, you've heard me say this a million times since we started Matter, and this is something that I did not invent, so I'm not taking credit for it. Some of the greatest football players, Tom Brady being one of them, are the people where this really comes from. But from my perspective on how I approach team building and kind of assessing these flaws and weaknesses, great leaders are not the best players on the team. They're not generally even the most skilled, they're not the most athletic. And I think it's the same way in sports. Great leaders are people who can come in and make every other person around them better, be able to assess and do so in a way where they can elevate each team member around them and help them understand, here's
yeah,
your strength, lean into it, and I'm going to elevate you and give you resources to be able to do that, or bring in other team members to help you do that, and they're going to lean into their strengths. And when you have that level of understanding, I mean, it's hard to maintain it, right? But we've seen it that when it clicks and when you're kind of in your vibe, your momentum, you're kind of cruising and it's clicking and everybody's beating at that same kind of path with each other and comfortability is there. Like I think that's where I've seen us have the most success. And not even just with Matter or any business that we've started in the past, but specifically in sports and other parts of life as well. Um, I do want to come back to one thing that you brought up, which I
yeah.
just think is a really interesting thing that we kind of skipped over. The concept around what you were talking about, which we talk a lot about now. We have read so many things and so many different books and LinkedIn posts, and we've even had people tell us these things, right, as it relates to business, like very fundamental
Business coaches,
philosophies.
YouTube videos,
Yeah,
books,
you read
all
it
of
in
it,
an accounting or
podcasts.
finance book when you're in business school of
Yeah.
like, this is the importance of why CAC is such a valuable indicator or why you need to do. And literally, this concept of like learning in entrepreneurship, right, is all about doing it, experiencing it. And it's kind of like you can't understand it until you do it, and then you really get it. Even if you read it 50 times in a book,
Yeah.
it just does not click until it happens. I equate it back to like fatherhood, right? Just had my first kid a few weeks ago.
Baby G.
Baby G, best experience of my life, changed everything for me overnight. And the funny thing is, I even posted about this, but like leading up to that point of the labor and having the baby come out, I was trying to think about like what type of father am I going to be? How am I going to feel? How am I going to love this child? All these things. And literally looking back on it, like you cannot understand it no matter what people tell you, no matter how hard you try, no matter how many books you read, no matter how many different experiences you try to relate it to with your dogs or your cats or your loved ones. You cannot understand the
Yeah.
love you have for a child as a parent until it happens. And that's a lot of what I think the journey of entrepreneurship is.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's a lot of what the learning and the experiences are. You truly can't understand them or learn from them until you go through them.
Yeah.
And that's why, we hear so much about people who have multiple time entrepreneurs, blah, 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 blah. You generally want to back them, right, in a race because they have so much more experience. And I believe in that. I think it's
So,
super true.
so devil's advocate, or to kind of play it on the
Yeah.
side to it, what value do you ascribe then to books or like getting more knowledge or a mentor, right? A business mentor
Yeah.
or an executive coach, like any of those things. If the only way to learn is like through doing, does that mean you shouldn't do those and they're a waste of time? Do you still do them? Like,
Oh man, we had a long conversation about this the other night over a bottle of wine at dinner. Um, oh man,
yeah,
I've had business coaches
yeah,
in our past. Ben Lee, shout out to Ben. He probably won't ever watch this, but um, he really helped elevate me in ways that were a lot different than what I originally thought. When I first set out on the journey to meet my executive coach, Ben, he ran an agency that literally, when we first started Matter, was one of the ones we tried to model our agency
yeah,
similar to for what they were doing. And he went through his journey. And when I kind of set out on finding him, my thought was like, man, this guy is going to bring so much business acumen and knowledge and all these other things to me to help me level up. But actually, the most valuable stuff I got from Ben had really nothing to do with that. It was from a lot of just the general life experience and knowledge that he gained from going through this same journey, where he can help me understand it more and reflect on it and learn from it faster. And that's where I think I got the most benefit from it. So when you talk about like, how do books help you prepare and do these other things? It's like we were talking about the other night. I believe that knowledge is power. I believe that most of the time, um, being knowledgeable, reading, having a laundry list of books that you have read as it relates to building business or whatever you're trying to do in your life generally can help you be more prepared, can help you maybe learn or grow faster. But I still am a firm believer that until you actually go through the experience, until you actually put real life experience behind these concepts or these things you're trying to learn, you just will not understand it the
yeah,
same way.
yeah,
And you will not be able to learn and grow from it the same way. Maybe you can be more prepared. Maybe you can go through the cycle faster. Maybe you can learn things to try so that you can fail faster and learn from them in an experience perspective. But, um, I also think it depends on what material we're talking about.
yeah. I think for me, like, I think I'm probably more or less in the same boat too. I think that more information that you have, generally speaking, can only be neutral or helpful, right? It's some more data points that you can make decisions based off of. And I think that the measure for what data or data points you bring in with podcasts, YouTube, video, like books, mentors, etc., executive coaches, is like how believable are they, right? So like, what is their track record based on
Yeah.
success? If it's Sundar, whatever his name
Right.
is, the CEO of Google, and he's mentoring you, you should
You're
probably
probably
listen
going
to
to
it because
listen to
yeah,
him more than
pretty good track record, right?
Billy Bob Joe.
Yeah, the guy with three
Or
thousand
us,
followers on
right?
yeah,
Or us
yeah, yeah,
writing the
yeah,
book.
exactly, right. So like, you gotta evaluate how believable that person is,
Yeah.
right? And then the objective for taking in additional knowledge is, can you learn from someone else's mistakes and shorten the time for taking you from where you are to where you want to be?
Yeah.
And that's it. And if you can shave off one day maybe
It's a
that's
net
worthwhile,
positive.
right? Maybe
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, exactly, right? Or maybe you're shaving off a year. That's obviously fucking amazing. But like, that's the measurement through which you need to do it. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because I think even if you had the perfect knowledge, though, like if you had Elon Musk and he's like, "Here's my playbook. Go do my playbook. You will be successful." That's still just knowledge. You still need the practical doing. And
Right.
without doing and failing and then learning and then doing more and then failing more and then doing more, right? Just that iterative cycle. Like you have to have that action part. Otherwise you won't truly internalize the rules. So I do think it's kind of both
I have a
pieces.
question for you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the other side of that when it can potentially become detrimental. Um,
Yeah.
I want to hear your
Yeah.
opinion on this because you kind of know a little bit about where my
Yeah.
opinion is.
I mean, I think for me, it's a great question. I think there are actually multiple ways in which it can be detrimental. So one of the most common ones that I see, especially with entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, right, early stage founders, is that it feels like you're taking action, but you're not. So like if you're like, oh, I read 52 books this year on like business and like I follow all the podcasts and all, but if you don't actually take action,
That's
then
interesting.
it's like mental masturbation, right? You're just
Yeah.
kind of like doing something that you feel like is productive, but you're actually not doing anything,
Yeah.
right? So I'd say that that's one bucket, right? I think there's another bucket which you and I were talking about, which is like,
Misinformation.
yeah, so like the believability or the viability of that source of information, and also
Misinformation.
how well it aligns to your situation or not,
Yeah.
because it could be accurate information.
Or change your perception.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right. So like maybe it's absolutely true for that person, but that is not actually applicable to you, right? So maybe you read an amazing book on building a SaaS business, but you're actually a service business, and so like that information of like how you're supposed to measure CAC and LTV and do all these calculations, and they're super helpful. Maybe they actually won't help you at all in your business. Maybe they'll hurt you because you'll be running after the wrong objectives and using the wrong playbook, right? So there's the old like adage of like the what is it? The goal is the mountain, and then the plan of attack is the ladder, and you got to make sure that the ladder is on the right
Right.
tree, whatever it is, right? So you could have a really good playbook for how to get somewhere, but if you're getting to the wrong place and it doesn't align with who you are or what you're trying to be,
It's not super useful.
that's not great. And then there's also
Like,
just bad information, right?
yeah, and
Disinformation
I
that's
think
completely
about it too, though, with the disinformation and the perception. Is like I use this example. My wife's gonna kill me, but while she's been pregnant, she's been spending a ton of time on Reddit. And I think it's brought a lot of comfort to her just hearing other moms go through their experiences,
yeah.
right? But for me, one of the things that I really noticed is that you are so susceptible to the perceptions and the attitude or mentality that the people on the other end of the blog post are feeling or how they are, right? So, for example,
Susceptible to how the other people, the writers, are feeling.
right,
Okay.
in their
Yeah.
perception.
Yeah.
If she's reading a post from a mom who's going through a situation and looking at morning sickness or some component of what they're going through is like, this fucking sucks. This is awful. Like, this is terrible. And then you read that. Naturally, like humans can feel or sense that, and that can change your perspective
Right.
and how you approach the situation.
It's like you're priming and
Versus, right.
adopting the
Like
emotional
if you
state.
read a post from people who are like, man, this is that, but like I feel great and this is awesome and this is so much good and this is so much fun. And yeah, that's not the best, but that level of perception, that level of approach, that level of mentality, and
Yeah.
everything in life to me is about perception. Everything in life is about your mentality and your attitude and your approach, right? If you can approach every situation. It's like the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. I think that's what they say on these stupid cuss. Always half full.
Always
Right?
half full.
Like, so that level of perception can be so
Yeah.
deceptive when you're reading things from people that you don't really know or whatever. Maybe
Yeah.
even you do know that.
Yeah.
And so that's where sometimes I feel like there could be negative benefits, or not benefits, but negative impact
Yeah.
from, you know, material or reading material or content, especially
Yeah.
nowadays, right? With how like widely accessible content is from so many different avenues that you have no idea who's writing it or anything about most of these people that are putting shit out there, especially on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
right? Reddit.
You don't know if the person that's making the YouTube video rented the Lamborghini for a day or he actually has a multi-million dollar real estate empire. Yeah.
You have no idea. So like, take it for a grain of salt,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
All right, so I want to switch topics. So we kind of explored, some of the entrepreneurial mindset, team building.
yeah, we're all over the
About
place.
well, no, it's great though. But so I want to. We got to talk about AI.
Oh
Everyone's
gosh,
fucking talking about it, of course,
we're
right?
gonna go.
We're
Can
doing
we
a
do
bunch of
this
stuff
on
with it.
another podcast? All right.
Well, I mean, it's going to come up again and again, right? It's not like it's just one conversation. So there's just so much to unpack there.
Uh,
The thing that I think could be interesting to share to start though is like we've all kind of been seeing this AI process. We all had ideas of what it would be. Go back 2 years, just 2 years, right, or 5 years. Everyone thought, okay, robots are coming eventually, right? Automation of jobs,
they are
like the
coming.
Amazon, all right, we'll talk about that then. The Amazon like fulfillment or manual labor jobs will be replaced. And then what we've seen in the past 6 months, 12 months is like, oh shit, that was kind of wrong.
Yeah.
What's being replaced first is the white collar jobs. It's the copywriting. It's the artists, perhaps, right? It's the code writing, right? Like all these things that we thought were going to be a lot more complex, a lot more difficult to replace. We're seeing major strides in that. So this is the question. You run a services company.
Yeah.
How are you adapting to AI, which for all intents and purposes is eventually going to consume or be able to, right? Be able to consume basically the entire services industry,
Yeah.
right?
It's a great question. I mean, like honestly, I give you a lot of credit for how we've kind of shifted our mindset for what we're doing, to be honest, because I think for me, I probably have a lot more level of fear initially around AI and especially what it's going to do to our industry. Like the industry it's already coming for right now and we're seeing it is developing,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's like from the product design perspective, the product management perspective, or just purely engineering. Like there's companies out there that are setting goals that 75 to 90% of their code bases will be written by LLMs this year. Like that's a scary concept for people like us.
Yeah.
Um, but part of like the whole belief in our business is like for every piece of technology that is developed, there's a face behind it. And a lot of why we set out to even build Matter was because we saw how terrible people on technology development were treated from a culture perspective. Especially in the startup world, like a lot of times founders do not treat their people with like a healthy mentality and give them a space. It feels very like we need to hit this deadline. You have to do this. I'm working on the weekend. You should work on the weekend, right? Like it's been a very toxic culture from what we've seen, and it's been really tough for people when
Can be, right? Not always.
can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
We've tried to
Yeah.
change it, but I think the thing that you kind of taught me with AI is if I were to sum it up in like one phrase, lean into it. Like there's
Yeah.
so much potential out there for how it can help our people with what they're doing and how we can help our clients and build better technology. And if you try to resist change, I mean, there's been millions of smarter people than me who have talked about this concept. It generally doesn't go well, right?
Yeah.
Like, look at the Blockbuster Netflix example, right? Blockbuster didn't buy Netflix when they could have for $50 million. Oh, fuck you, blah, blah,
They
blah.
laughed them out of the
They
room or
laughed them
something.
out of
Yeah.
the room,
Yeah.
right? Now look how many blockbusters are there in the world. So like I think leaning into it and instead of being afraid of it and shying away from it, what we're doing now at Matter and what you're doing and really help push me to do is figure out ways of how do we integrate it with what we're doing?
Yeah.
How do we get ahead of it? How do we won't be one of the first people to market to take advantage of its capabilities to help our clients and help our people? And so that's been really, really great, honestly. It's been really reassuring. It makes me feel a lot more confident about the future of where these technologies go, and it feels like there's a lot of opportunity, which is exciting. So we're going to be kind of a little candid tidbit for whoever reaches this, but we're releasing an AI certification program. So essentially, we've been working
Like
on
for engineers,
for
right?
engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah, for engineers, we've been working on for the last month or so, taking all of these tools out there, these that are really stemming from kind of what is existing with these LLM platforms that give developers and product people, software people, a leg up or an advantage for them to do what they do. And we've been kind of compiling it into a toolkit and then running and building training courses. So all of the people that matter are going to be
Yeah.
AI certified or have kind of this next level of toolkit in their belts, for what is going to help them with their their jobs and ultimately help build better technology for our clients. And so that's something that we're looking to maybe even bring out externally
Yeah.
to people who are interested in the engineering space specifically.
Yeah. I mean, I think from my perspective too, I mean, you summed it up well, right? Is like lean into it, embrace it, right? Just like it's clearly not going away, right? Whether there's a moratorium, if people sign a paper, whatever, it's going to be developed. This technology is here. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's fucking happening. So you can bury your head in the sand and pretend it's not, or you can throw your hands up in the air and say, "This is stupid. I hate everything," right? Or you can be like, "Okay, this is here. How can I use it? How can I learn from it? How can I use it? How can I adapt it?" And I think we as a human society, we just as people, have no clue where this goes, right? There's tons of people who pontificate about this, that it's going to the, we're all gonna die. Like who knows, right? But the only way in which I've found that you can really learn, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier, is you got to do. You just have to do, right? You got to get in the sandbox. You start throwing sand around, see what makes sense, see how it works, see how to use it. And like you and I were talking last night about like all the different AI things I've been like
Oh,
randomly,
so cool.
like
Yeah.
building and doing for
All the shit
fun, like
you're doing,
exploring.
like,
And like, I don't even necessarily know what the business application is yet.
right.
This is not like
That's why
necessarily
I'm
a
here.
tactical, exactly, right? But it's like you got to get in and you got to get your hands dirty. And then you got to be like, okay, this is how it works. This is what this tool is. This makes sense. This doesn't quite work. This is helpful over here. And then you just keep iterating, iterating. So the more that we lean into it, the more that Matter just starts doing things in AI, the
Yeah.
more we'll learn and be like, oh, we were just doing that 3 months ago. That was so basic. Now we're thinking about things this way. And now we're using these 16 tools all directly integrated to make all of our team members better.
Yeah, the thing too, especially with what we were talking about last night for the stuff you've been working on, it's a good distinction for me to look at this. Like everybody likes to talk about this artificial intelligence space, right? To me, it's very clearly distinct concepts of like what large language models are doing versus AGI,
Yeah.
like true general, artificial intelligence. And I think we're still pretty far away from AGI,
Yeah.
but I think once we get to that path, that's where like
Yeah.
your mind kind
Yeah.
of blows. And like some of the stuff you're working on, which I want you to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
here for a few minutes because I think it's super interesting. But to me, it starts to get to the root of pushing the precipice from where we are today towards AGI, right? Generally, like what you've been building is conceptually framework to capture human consciousness and how humans think
Yeah.
and make decision making processes. And like being able to do that with software and a lot of data to the point where it can then start to have its own dreams and thoughts
Yeah.
and memories. Like that's nuts.
Right?
And like we are there. Like we are working on this stuff now. There's hundreds and hundreds of people, wicked smart people who are building this stuff out. So tell me about what you've been working on.
Yeah.
Because I think it's pretty cool for folks to hear about.
I don't know. I mean, it was like a 40-minute conversation. So
Yeah. Well, just
I'll try to summarize.
give
Yeah.
us the
So
2 minutes.
first things first, this is not like a novel concept. I did not come up with this. I'm also doing it with two other friends. So like this is not just me. But basically, we got really excited by the simulation paper that was released by Google and Stanford developers, which is if you haven't read it, super cool. Basically, what they did was took they took LLMs, right? They took specifically ChatGPT, OpenAI, and built 25 agents that live in a little, think like Zelda, like a little Sims sandbox world, and then they make plans about their lives, and then they go live them out, and then they talk to each other, and they form memories, and they live, right? Imagine the best NPC in a video game that you've ever met that actually lives out its own life. Think Westworld, right? So that was the research paper that they released. We ended up reaching out to them. They haven't actually. They helped us a little bit with some things, but we were like, okay, this is super interesting. We want to learn more about this. Let's try to recreate it. And it's kind of morphed from that, changed a bit. But basically, the concepts that you have to deal with to recreate human like behavior, you start thinking about what actually drives human beings. And as you start going down that thought process, weird things happen. You start reflecting on how do you make decisions? What is consciousness, right? You start asking these big questions. So to boil it down, from a code perspective, we've actually rebuilt basically the entire simulacra functionality, right? So our agents make plans at the start of the day. They go execute their plans. they adapt and react to their environment. So if they see that the stove's on fire, they'll scrap their plan, go pour water on the stove. My thing is with my testing environment, I light their hair on fire, and then it's always like runs to the shower, pours water on head, goes to the hospital to
Yeah,
like
so
get
so
bandages.
so explain for
Yeah,
people who
yeah,
may not
yeah,
be as familiar what you're talking about with these agents and like what
yeah.
you're simulating, right? You're writing code
Yes,
and you're basically training, right, this artificial intelligence
yep,
or agent that you're saying on how to store memories and concepts and then make decisions based off of what is happening around them in a environment that you're building.
yes. I mean
Like that's
that's exactly
fucking
it.
nuts.
Yeah, it is
Like,
pretty crazy.
like
We're like literally talking about this as a not a sci-fi thing, but yeah, I mean that's what we do. So it's like an agent is basically a fancy word for a person, an entity, right? Again, this is simulated, but it's like a person, right? And so we basically kind of make a backstory. You are Bob. You like going fishing. You
right.
you work at the pharmacy, right? And then we give him some memories, right? And it's like Bob yesterday went to the store and bought groceries and whatever. So like that's kind of the baseline. And we just write this out, right? This is just text in a code file. And then we say this is where we kind of start crafting prompts and we say, okay, based on all this context, what do you want to do for the day? Break that down into small steps, right? And then as he maps out his plan, then we say, okay, go do the next thing. The time is now 12:05. The time is now 12:10. Like, what are you doing right now? And Bob's like, oh, I'm asleep. Oh, I woke up. Oh, I'm doing this. Each time he does something, he forms a memory. He forms a memory that he's currently in the shower, taking a shower. He forms a memory that Rich just showed up and started talking to him, that they had a conversation, they planned for something later. So these are then memories that are then put into basically a database, a vector database, which are very interesting too. And then based on all of those memories, there's two things that happen. So one is that those memories will be recalled, just like humans recall memories when they become relevant. So say he goes to the supermarket, he might remember the things that he had bought from the grocery
Right.
list that he made this morning, right? So he'll start pulling up memories. He'll also remember that the clerk's name is Susan and that he actually wants to ask her out on a date, right?
So
So
like
he'll kind of
storing memories, like if he's making eggs every morning for breakfast, he knows
exactly.
I use 2 eggs. These days I'm out of eggs.
Exactly, exactly. And then there's more complex things called reflections, which is when you take a bunch of memories and you compress them. So the example I always give is like if Bob woke up at 9, he has a memory of waking up at 9 a.m. on Monday and going to work, and then 9 a.m. on Tuesday and going to work, and 9 a.m. on Wednesday and going to work. He might reflect on all of that and reflect that, oh, I'm a consistent person, right? Or my typical routine is getting up at 9 a.m., right? And that's a more complex thought, right? It's a more complex memory. And then eventually they become identities, right? So then he starts building these into like even more comprehensive. It's not just a reflection and a memory. It's an identity driver for who Bob is, like a consistent person. And so he emphasizes that in his decision making, right?
It's nuts. I
Yeah.
mean, we were talking about it last night, and like my mind immediately goes to like put this in a robot
Yeah.
for me at my house,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Because like honestly, like from the technology, from the hardware perspective, like they've been working on pretty complex robotics for quite some time now, and bridging this gap of the software component to be able to kind of implement this type of decision making pattern
Yeah.
into a physical being or
Yeah.
physical machine,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. Like, is that where this goes?
I mean, I think again, this is the thing about like getting in the sandbox and playing, is like it's so hard to project or predict where it's
Yeah.
going. But if you just start playing with it, the path will emerge. And then also you're fantastic at kind of seeing pieces, then figuring out what that plan is, and that's a something that's not a
Yeah.
core strength for me.
Yeah.
Um,
You need to paint.
yeah,
We talk a
yeah,
lot about
yeah,
this
yeah,
concept, but like you're creative and you need to have a canvas and paint.
yeah,
For me, I'm a creative, but in a different sense of, I look at a canvas and I can almost paint it by number. I
yeah,
see, hey, if this is the ultimate vision and goal and how do I get here? Here's block 12, which is red. Here's block 13, right? So, like me, but for you, your free flowing creativity leads you to drive all of these learnings and
yeah,
experiences and experiment to be able to help push the bounds on what is happening, specifically in technology, is generally where
yeah.
you've really gravitated towards, right? But, obviously, your dad's an artist by trade. Um, so, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to kind of see the approach and hear you play around with this type of stuff. And it also is great for me because then it gives me insight and
Yeah.
perspective into things that I'd have no idea about
Yeah.
otherwise. So you're like my leading edge guy on the
Yeah.
front end of like experimenting with these technologies. You go and do it and do it and do it, learn something, and then come back and tell
Yeah.
me. And I'm like, great. My mind goes to like, well, how do we optimize this? How do we put this into a business
Yeah.
model? How do we create value out of this to give to people? So
To further maybe stress that point, just in terms of like me being leading edge, like wow, hungover in bed at 6:30 this morning, I signed up for two new AI tools that are, they're all out there
yeah,
on LinkedIn, whatever, and I started playing with them, and like I generated a WordPress website through some AI tool that someone just built, and
yeah.
then also a CRM or like a sales networking, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big
Yeah,
proponent of how we started Matter,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like having a creative space for us to be able, and more specifically for you as it catered to some of your skill sets from the technical perspective, to have a creative space to be able to explore.
yeah.
We've now invested and been a part of what 20 different businesses throughout this
It's
journey,
pretty crazy when you think
right?
about it. Yeah,
While running Matter, and Matter being kind of our main arm of facilitation for delivering technology. Um, but it's cool, it's kind of given us this like uh, opportunity where like people who know this or don't know this about us and what we do at Matter, but we build software for every industry, every type of client,
and not
which
just
is like,
startups, generally startups, but also
yeah, I
like
mean,
publicly
Fortune
traded companies.
500
Yeah,
mid-market companies, right?
yeah,
Like the largest crane and rigging company in the world. Like, what the fuck did we know about crane and rigging when we went into that opportunity? Nothing. But we got to learn this industry, learn this space, and then try to have a creative approach of like, wow, how can technology really change it or impact it? So, um, it's a cool part of what I think we do at Matter and what we get to do on a day to day. But I think it's also, a cool part of like a piece of what you are into Matter and what stimulates your creativity and helping to push those bounds, which keeps us forward thinking at Matter, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. No, very much so, very much so. One thing we could also touch on is remote work. How do you see, like we've been remote since day one, right? So
Yeah.
6 years
Before
or something.
COVID,
Yeah,
Matter's been around for 5.5 years for people who don't know. And really, we started it 6 months before that. So almost
yeah,
6 years.
yeah. So
So
like
way before COVID.
we've been doing it for ever. So well, 6 years.
Before it was cool.
Yeah, and before it was cool. And obviously with COVID, everyone kind of went remote, right?
Yeah.
So, but one of the things that I've been seeing and as I talk to people is like not all remote cultures are equal.
Yep.
What's your thought on how to build a successful remote culture? Like, what does that mean to you? Is it better than in person? Like, what are your thoughts about in person cultures and businesses? All right, imagine you're talking to an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They're going to start their company, right?
Mhm.
What advice would you give about location, remote, not remote?
Yeah. I've spent so much freaking time thinking about this over the years.
Yeah,
The general gist that I always defer back on this is kind of my like default answer I tell people. As a business owner and leader, I don't think people should be in the business of telling grown adults where and when they should be at places to work. So I just throw that out there, right? However, how you build your remote culture to what you're talking about is essential to what results, like from a productivity perspective and a happiness perspective, you drive. You have to be very intentional about everything you do in a remote culture, which most companies aren't, and they don't really think about it. Like we've done so many different things in our secret sauce for like ways that we've tried to build our remote culture, and a lot of it stems around from connectedness, trying to keep people connected and together, which is one of the biggest things that I think misses um, in remote environments. But the other thing that I think COVID taught me, to be honest with you, is that not every job is made equal in terms of it being able to be remote or not. We're
like not
fortunate.
all jobs can really do remote
Yeah,
effectively.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we're fortunate in technology that for us, a lot of what we do, pretty much everything we do, you can do very effectively, if not the same, in a remote environment versus being in person. But, the example I equate it back to for the opposite of that is like banks or Goldman, right? I think about how much I learned from my time at Goldman Sachs. I would have never, ever been able to learn as much as I've learned if we were in a remote environment.
Like one of the examples, talk about the listening on phone calls or
Yeah,
whatever.
like everything I did was because I was sitting on a desk next to these partners and these people who are just like next level, listening to everything they say, watching every move they made.
This is like 18-year-old Rich, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and this is where I was absorbing so much of what I ended up learning, so much of where my principles and foundation comes from for how I approach business and how I'm an operator.
Yeah.
Like I learned how to be an operator from not these guys sitting there and teaching me, not from business school. I learned how to be an operator from listening on that desk and spending 90 hours a week on it, observing.
Yeah.
And you know, you talk about the specific example, a gentleman early in my career, Ryan Newman, who's a phenomenal, phenomenal guy, wicked smart, in the investment space at Goldman, taught me so much. And one of the things that he gave to me for how hard I would work would give me the ability to just listen in on any call or conversation he had, which was so viable for me to learn from, and being able to sit in the conference room with him while he was on a call and listen in. If you're in a remote environment, that's a lot more of a challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
So I struggle kind of with this concept. I mean, I'd say in technology, I think it's been able to really create. We've have a pretty healthy culture, and I think most of our employees are pretty happy. We take a lot of pride in that. I think you also come into play the questions of scale, right? We're a smaller company, so it's a lot easier to manage, across the U.S. and in that sense, as you start to have more and more and more and more and more and more and more people. Just like with anything in scale, it's a lot more challenging to
Yeah.
make sure people are staying on the right path and being productive. Um, so, I go back and forth. I mean, personally, I miss going into an office. I miss like human connection
Yeah.
and that level that I really just, that level of connection that I don't think you can really create in a remote culture. And we do everything to try to do it. And there's more we could do by far. And we would love to. A lot of it also just comes down to how much time and resources you have to be able to do that. Companies that have a lot more resource and ability to invest into their remote cultures, I think have a leg up. The funny thing is, most of these companies don't.
Don't have the resource or don't
They
invest.
just don't invest. They
Yeah.
have the
No.
resources. Like, look
Yeah.
around at all these technical companies. Like,
Yeah.
to them, they don't think much more beyond about what is remote culture and how do you take it to the next level. And they're not really trying to push it or innovate it. They're just like, this is what it is. You can work from home, right? Like, but how many companies are actually really thinking about
And
it?
I would also say that, resources are great, but and again, it's been overplayed and said many times, but like it's not necessarily about your resources, it's about your resourcefulness. And like I
Yeah,
think of the example, like
totally.
just last month or something, we did a Fall Guys, the video game, a
Yeah,
Fall Guys day
yeah,
at Matter, not
yeah.
day, but like,
That was
so
cool.
we took an hour or two,
Shout out to
like
Phoebe and whoever else helped
yeah,
set that
everyone who
up.
helped set that up, like, and we had just 10 people that showed up, 15 people or something like that, that like were just having a fucking awesome time
Yeah,
playing this stupid derpy video game. And like it didn't cost Matter anything, right? But it took a little bit of time of planning, a little bit of effort. The game's free, and like so many companies could benefit from just getting people together in a non like it doesn't have to always be work. And that's the
right.
thing. Like when you're in a remote culture now, it's like every meeting, every Zoom meeting, every Google Meets meeting, whatever, it's all work all the time. You miss
Yeah,
that like water
100%.
cooler chat,
Yeah,
after hours or
yeah,
after work happy hours, right?
yeah,
And just like resourcefulness, man. I mean, like it's not that hard to like take a little bit of
yeah,
time, be a little bit intentional to bring people together. And it's hard to measure the ROI if you're trying to be super like, you know,
yeah,
measurement focused on that. But like the value is massive. The value is massive in terms of probably if you were to attribute it, it's like retention and fulfillment and happiness and growth and all these other aspects that are really important to taking care of your people at a company.
yeah. The biggest challenge too for Matter is, we're a consultancy, right? At the end of the day. So a lot of times our people aren't always even able to work with each other
Right.
on different
They're
projects because
siloed on
we
projects.
have so
Yeah.
many different
Yeah.
clients. So like, trying to bridge that gap of connectedness to make it really feel like Matter is your home. Matter is your place, even if you're over here on client XYZ. And maybe you end up converting full time to client XYZ, and that's great. Like Matter wants you to be in a place that you want to be in. But I used to always think, well, damn it, we're not going to be able to really effectively do this from a remote perspective if people aren't on the same teams. And I used to be like, how can we create working projects and things for people to work together? But over the last 3 or 4 months, I did kind of interviews with every single person at Matter. And the repeating or common theme that I heard is that actually, no, just doing the social events, just having kind of a intentional place to connect, it doesn't have to be like working together,
Yeah.
is enough
Yeah.
to make them feel that level of connectedness, to get to know each other. Like they don't have to work together to have that. You don't have to work with someone every day to have that. So figuring out how to continue to push that forward, without having to be like, you're working together here or there, because like we don't always have control. Most of the time we don't have control on
Yeah.
like how we're putting team members together on varying
Yeah.
projects, right? And when we do, that's generally the most successful projects we have that Matter, because the way we put people together by finding the right people and fitting them together, as we talked about earlier, is all about their synergies and their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yeah.
So that's where you get that level of cohesion and synergistic output, which makes Matter so valuable from that perspective when they are together. But a lot of times we don't always have control over that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Phoebe posted about something recently, which was about remote culture, and it was like infinite social channels. So always having, so we have social channels, which is a Slack channel. You can make it for anything. So there's social gaming, there's social travel, there's social food. But like having those dedicated virtual spaces, which is a Slack channel, where people can post photos of
And
food or
using
whatever. Yeah. And
using
engaging.
like
Yeah.
the more people try to engage, the better off it is. Like one person can make a big difference in a remote culture, but it takes the entire company to want to participate.
Yes.
And that's been a hard thing to also
You
maintain,
got to have
right?
intentional participation.
Yeah, because if you don't want to, I'm not going to force you to
Right.
participate.
Right.
But ultimately, the people we're trying to find are the people who want to,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And those are the people that we really want at the organization. But, people going out of their way to post a picture here or there, do it. And I'm terrible at it, like you and I were so busy. I'm in every other Slack channel a lot of the times other than social, dealing with all the stuff we deal with. And I would love to do more of that, but that stuff goes such a long way. It's
Yeah.
so important,
Yeah, it really does. So I want to close out here, and my final thing that I want to talk about is, where are you focused right now? What is on Rich's mind, whether it's for Matter, for the business, for AI, for the world, whatever? Like, obviously, your new daughter,
Yeah.
but then beyond that, right? Like, where does your mind go on a business front?
Yeah.
Um,
So my
yeah.
focus is being a dad.
Yep.
Being a new dad. I'm enjoying every minute of it. I'm obsessed with this little girl. She's my everything. So just, for me, fatherhood is
Yeah.
my priority right now in life. And from a work perspective, Matter, the economy and what is happening with the economy, I think there's still a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that scare me, and we can talk about this on the next podcast. But with Matter is coming out of a period over the last 18 to 24 months that we really tried to push for scale and build out a lot of internal infrastructure at the organization to be able to scale. And we didn't scale in the way that I wanted us to. Um, for varying reasons. But this is a new chapter. I think we've kind of closed the book on that chapter of what Matter is, and going forward, what we're really focused on is getting back into what the roots of Matter really was, which was building technology with people we really love. And I think we slid a little bit away from that over the last 24 months. So, like, getting back into technology, comprehensive technology development, and really also looking outside and beyond, using all of this experience and knowledge that you and I have built for bridging the gap of a business and where technology fits in a business. Because so many people
Right. Right.
come into the approach of like, technology is everything. Technology
People
is
think
your whole business.
technology is the business,
Right.
and technology
And
is a piece of the
so
business.
doing more of that, helping these companies who maybe are not as technical or don't have the experience that we have, to help them actually build a business and utilize technology in a way to facilitate that to solve big problems. That's where I'm like hyper focused going forward, and Matter is our tool, or our creation of how do we actually develop the technology and being able to facilitate the technical component of that.
I
I
love
think
it.
that that's kind of what this next chapter entails for us.
Yeah. That no, I mean it's I'm excited to see what that next chapter is. I'm excited to see how we start measuring success perhaps differently than we did before,
Yeah.
right? And kind of realigning and getting clarity. I think clarity is one of the things that has just come up in so many conversations that we've had over the past several weeks, several months.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Clarity's amazing. Yeah.
It is. It's exciting, and there's so much opportunity. We talk about artificial intelligence and like getting back into the bleeding edge
Yeah.
of what's happening in technology and how do we incorporate it into Matter, you know, and there's so many other phenomenal software products and companies out there that need our help, and really just getting back into like where can we really help
Yeah.
versus like maybe what's the most scalable model or how this company's doing it over here or that company, just going back into like the roots of like what we built.
Value creation.
Value creation, right?
Yep.
Creating value at all costs. And like, yes, technology is our specialty.
Yeah. I love it. If people want to like connect with you or, talk with you, like where should they
Yeah,
go?
I mean, LinkedIn me.
All right.
I'm more active on LinkedIn now.
Yeah.
Richard Zazo is my LinkedIn at Richard Zazo. My email, Richard at Matter Product Studio. But to be honest, I don't really look at email anymore. I
Yeah.
get a bajillion emails a day, and most of it is people trying to sell me stuff that I'm selling at Matter. So, I mean, not generally the best way to get me, but if you send me a thoughtful post or connection on LinkedIn and I'll most likely look to connect back if I can be of some value or help to folks.
Awesome. Well,
Appreciate you doing this.
yeah,
Man.
dude, this is fun.
A lot of fun.
This is so fun.
See you again soon.
Maybe to be continuing another WeWork in the future.
Yeah, for sure.